tenure to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today on the program, we are talking to Joe Demanuelle-Hall about the Alabama Troublemakers school next week. We are talking to Bobby Watson about the paper mill lockout going on in South Alabama. Amazon warehouses are catching fires across the country. Bosses are firing pregnant workers for being union supporters, and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail or a text message throughout the week, and we might play it on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us online. We are anywhere you find anything online. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. I already said YouTube. Wherever you find your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. And folks, if you find us on the radio, you enjoy listening to us, you should really be following us online on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts in particular, because we have so much bonus content that comes out throughout the week. We've been doing candidate interviews. We're probably going to have about 10 candidate interviews that are long, 30, 40, 50-minute conversations with candidates about their candidacy, why they're running, stuff like that. We do overtime every Saturday, which is a whole second half of the show. Occasionally, I will post videos exclusive to TikTok. You get my snarky tweets if you follow us on Twitter, if you follow me and the show on Twitter. Lots of cool stuff. And, a lot of places, and maybe this is because I'm not a very good businessman, but a lot of places will paywall their extra content. Not us, folks. It's all free. It's all free because we want everybody to be able to see everything that we're doing. And that is made possible by our listeners that do support the show monetarily, and by our sponsors. Our largest single source of funding does come directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation, buy our hat or our stickers, you can go to our website, tvlr.fm, our store, tvlr.fm/store. You can make a donation at tvlr.fm/donate or become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. If you're a member of a union, you should think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor is a segment that we do mostly every week where we tell you what happened in the labor movement in the South. We pull the information from Jonah Furman's newsletter, Who Gets the Bird, which compiles all this information for the entire United States. So if you want to see what's going on outside of the South, then subscribe to his newsletter, whogetsthebird.substack.com. And with that, let's jump into new organizing for the weeks of September 10th through October 2nd. And just a note, because this is a 3-week edition, some of the smallest filings have been left out. In Erlanger, Kentucky, 900 DHL workers are officially unionizing with Teamsters Local 100, having filed a petition after openly organizing for some months. 550 workers for utility line construction services in Region 10, headquartered in Indian Trail, North Carolina, are organizing with IBEW Local 379. Having announced their campaign last month, 180 workers at GE Aviation in Auburn, Alabama, have formally filed to unionize with IUE-CWA. 142 more Starbucks workers at 8 stores have filed to join Workers United over the past 3 weeks, including in Arlington, Virginia, and Shavano Park, Texas. 61 workers at independent bookstore McKay Books in Knoxville, Tennessee, are unionizing with CWA. This is happening after the Chattanooga location has already filed for a union election. After the big win at the local Hine Brothers coffee chain, 35 more baristas at Sunargo's Coffee in Louisville, Kentucky, are joining the same union, which is, oddly enough, the National Conference of Firemen and Oilers, which is primarily a railroad union, which is somehow an affiliate of 32BJ SEIU, which is primarily a janitorial and doorman union. Just funny stuff, funny stuff. 32 AV workers at Houston, Texas's Wortham Center are joining IATSE Local 51. 31 food service workers at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, are unionizing with OPEIU Local 4873. 16 hotel workers at the Hampton Inn in Glen Allen, Virginia, are joining Hotel Workers United. It's unclear if that's an independent union or something with Unite Here or Workers United. In election wins and losses for the past 3 weeks, 727 nurses at Ascension Seton Hospital in Austin, Texas, have won the biggest hospital union in Texas, joining National Nurses United in a 385 to 151 vote. Very impressive margin of victory.
Absolutely.
Huge bargaining unit. That's going to be really great for nurses across the state of Texas. The Texas Observer has the full story. The Starbucks Workers United campaign added 236 members after 10 stores voted a combined 93 to 28 to unionize, including in 3 locations in Texas, in Houston, San Antonio, and New Braunfels. 73 Starbucks workers at 3 stores, including in Lafayette, Louisiana, voted a combined 23 to 30 against joining Starbucks Workers United. 69 workers for Diversified Gas and Oil in West Virginia voted 44 to 21 to join the Steelworkers Union. Another location of retail chain Half Price Books has unionized, with 17 workers voting 9 to 8 in Louisville to join UFCW Local 227. As that union drive quietly rolls on, 7 concrete truck drivers for IMI in Scottsville, Kentucky, voted 6 to 1 to join the Teamsters Local 89. 6 staffers for energy efficiency nonprofit EnergyWise in New Orleans, Louisiana, voted 4 to 1 to join IBEW Local 130. 475 subcontracted airport ground service workers for Jetstream in Charlotte, North Carolina, are at the center of what looks like a turf war between the Machinists and SEIU 32BJ, and grad workers at Duke in Durham, North Carolina, have dropped cards in their campaign to join SEIU, which was inconclusive after their last vote in 2017. In strikes and bargaining, folks, the country got within 20 hours of a national freight rail strike, with 120,000 workers ready to walk, or just as likely, as we have talked about on the show, get locked out by the carriers, before Marty Walsh tweeted that it was all over. The main upshot is that it is not, in fact, over, but it is deferred at least until mid-October, or more likely December the 9th. Whatever happened in that room between Marty Walsh, Joe Biden, and the heads of the rail unions and the heads of the freight rail carriers, They did manage to kick the can past the midterms, past the major harvests, and into December. Just this past week, the Machinists District 19 announced a new tentative agreement as well, delaying their September 29th strike deadline all the way to December as well. And the IBEW announced that their members voted to ratify their deal, making them the third of the dozen unions to sign on to a deal. The biggest wild card currently is BMWE, the Brotherhood of Maintenance and Way employees, the third biggest union involved, whose vote results will be announced on October 10th, but who, as far as we've seen, have not announced whether they're joining up on the December 9th strike deadline or if they would consider walking earlier. It's hard to see all of these passing ratifications since before that, internal polling by these unions had the passing rate, had the acceptance rate by members at something like 70% against. 70% against. And so considering where members were before these new tentative agreements and how little additional benefits are in the new deals, it's difficult to see a 30 to 40 point swing in the yes vote for these contract agreements. So we'll see what happens there. Meanwhile, the United Mine Workers of America strike at Warrior Met in Brookwood, Alabama drags on. And the NLRB has downgraded the financial penalty that the union has to pay the company back down to the $400,000 price range, as opposed to the $13 million that they were recently assessed, per Warrior Met strike reporter extraordinaire Kim Kelly. Meanwhile, outside the airports, the Southwest Airline Pilots Association has asked for mediation, which is a formality under the Railway Labor Act, but technically an escalation nonetheless, and picketed at airports, as did the Southwest flight attendants, with the Transport Workers Union Local 556, who also asked for mediation in July. Delta pilots with the Airline Pilots Association are one step ahead of both of them, having initiated a strike authorization vote already. UPS aircraft mechanics with Teamsters Local 2727 have quietly reached a new 2-year tentative agreement, though it is still subject to a ratification vote by the members. There was some fascinating and unusual public sector strike activity in the South last week with non-union public workers in Selma, Alabama, Lowndes County, Alabama, and Hinds County, Mississippi, all going on strike. A paper mill owned by WestRock in Russell County, Alabama, was facing down a strike of 450 workers with Steelworkers Local 971, 1471, and 1972, but they are now locked out. We're going to be talking to Bobby Watson later about that. 1,100 steelworkers at Constellium in Ravenswood, West Virginia are facing down a strike deadline as workers have voted down a contract over 6 days. Get this, currently the workers get none. The workers get no sick days. The workers voted down that contract over the lack of sick days and over contracting. Apparently, a last, best, and final offer is being presented by the company before the strike deadline, but only changes the wage offer. So here again, just like with the paper mill in Russell County, Alabama, the company is trying to buy these things that are really not monetary in nature. The issues that these workers have are not monetary in nature. They are their living standards, their work-life balance, and they are surrounding, with the subcontracting, the integrity and unity of their union. And it's going to be difficult to buy that off of them. Starbucks Workers United went on strike in Atlanta, Georgia, and Raleigh, North Carolina last week. In the meantime, Starbucks now says it wants to bargain, giving a 3-week window for bargaining at all 240 some odd stores that have won a union vote. Workers at Amazon in Stone Mountain, Georgia went on strike. At Labor Notes, Luis Feliz Leon looked at Unite Here Local 355's strike threat at a big hotel in Hollywood, Florida, and how sometimes just a credible strike threat is enough to get the goods. The expiration deadline of the national contract covering 50,000 U.S. Postal Service workers with the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, which is a laborers affiliate, came and went with a brief bargaining update and nothing in the 2 weeks since. There's no threat of a strike here, but would be curious to know what exactly is holding things up and how members feel about it, as it is a very, very large contract, 50,000 workers. In political fights, Lee Harris has a fantastic and wide-ranging piece at the American Prospect on the shift to a green economy, unions' role in it, and the Democratic Party. The election is coming up, and workers in Tennessee will vote on whether or not to place right to work in the state's constitution. We've got to dig more into that, talk to some folks in the next few weeks about that. And finally, in internal union politics, there were several union conventions over the last few weeks, but the only notable thing came out of the Amalgamated Transport Union. Came out of their convention last month, where the union doubled and expanded their strike pay. They committed to open bargaining and internal union organizer trainings and nuts and bolts reforms that can meaningfully impact worker power on the job and in the union. So very good updates from the ATU there. Looking forward to seeing how that goes in the next few years. So, Adam, have we got Joe in the Zoom?
Yes, we do.
Then we will go right on to our next segment. Joe Demanuelle-Hall is a staff writer for Labor Notes who is hosting the Alabama Troublemakers School next week. Labor Notes is 1 week from today, so we're talking to him about that this morning. Joe, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for taking the time to talk about this. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So, Labor Notes does these troublemaker schools across the country. What for? What is the purpose of these troublemaker schools?
So one of Labor Notes' big flagship events is this conference that we do, this national conference that we do every 2 years in Chicago. And those are great. They bring together people from all over the place, but it's obviously a lift for people to get there. And the focus is a little bit more national in character, right? That people are talking from different geographies, they're sharing strategies, but the contexts can often be different. That's a really important educational opportunity. But there's a really added value, I think, in here in bringing these events to more local and regional settings, because you get people talking with one another who might share a little bit more in common in terms of the political situation that they're organizing under, and who might be neighbors, right? And getting to connect with people. So I think these things these types of events, Troublemaker Schools, which are these regional mini conferences that we do that tend to be one day, do a couple of things. One, I think they're important educational opportunities for a lot of union activists, especially for union activists who might be on the outs with their union leadership. They don't get a ton of support in terms of trying to learn how to organize, workshops, even basic organizing workshops, things as basic as steward workshops, learning basic stewards' rights. And so we've learned that these are really important things to be able to provide people, and that people are really thirsty for these. And every time we do them, especially recently, people are clamoring for them. So that's one piece of this, like basic organizing education. You can't have enough of it. A second piece of this, and I referenced this a little bit earlier, but is the connections and relationships that come out of this, these types of events. That they're open to all, unlike some, union conferences, educational conferences. You don't have to be sponsored by your union to go there. You can, if you're a labor activist, union or not, come down, come meet some other labor activists. And I think that's really valuable and important for this type of thing. But there are just so few opportunities in the labor movement for what I've come to call these lateral relationships in the labor movement, where if you're a rank and filer in one union, you're a steward in a school in your local school district, you might never talk to a public transit unionist, even if you have the same employer and you're in the same area. You might never talk to the Starbucks worker who is organizing in your city, right? And so these kinds of relationships, if we're really serious about building a labor movement and not just a series of silos, are incredibly important. And so I think that some of the real magic that happens in these things is not the one-way kind of education thing that happens, people learning about organizing, but are the conversations that people have, in those workshops, sharing stories at lunch in the hallway between these things. And I have found them to be incredibly valuable and really important and inspiring.
Yeah, and these, I think both of those are very, very important. And so let's spend a little bit of time on each of those in the just the nuts and bolts type training stuff. What are the kinds of things that union activists, maybe they're a steward or maybe they're a rank and filer who want to become more active in their union? What are some of the things that they can, or there's somebody who's in a non-union workplace, because you mentioned that this is open to anybody that wants to come. If you're interested in organizing, you can come to these things. And so, maybe you're a steward, you want to learn how to do your job better. You're a rank and filer in your union, you want to become more active, or you're a non-union worker who wants to change that, who wants to start taking some of the power that y'all have and working to protect yourselves and working to unionize your workplace. What are some of the things that they will be able to learn at these workshops?
Sure. Yeah. So from a few different angles that I think we're trying to hit this. One, there's a series of workshops that we do that are based on a book that Labor Notes put out a handful of years ago called Secrets of a Successful Organizer. That is a really great book, and these workshops really build off of that to try and get people to think about the organizing basics and how they can use organizing basics to really try to build power in their workplace and take the fight to the boss. So there's a series of 3 workshops that will be done at the Troublemakers School that are on that topic, and that I think are as broadly applicable to already unionized as well as non-union workers, to think about really how to talk to your coworkers, how to identify leaders in your workplace, how to plan actions, how to string together actions to make campaigns that can really win and build power. Another angle that we hit this from is, we both mentioned the Stewards education, which we've talked about before on the show. It's really important. Going to do something on the basic legal rights of union stewards, which a lot of stewards don't know and don't have the resources around. And while we should never be too reliant on the law to be able to back us up, it is good to know your rights, and stewards have rights, right? And it's important to enforce them. Another piece on the stewards thing, and this is very similar to the previous conversation that we had when I was on here, was about how stewards can use the issues that come up at work to try and organize, and not just play the whack-a-mole game of grievances, but using grievances to really get people involved, to take the fight to the boss, supercharging grievances by getting more people involved and really trying to win issues that way. And a third angle of the workshops that we're trying to hit there is some of the bigger picture stuff that might not fall under organizing 101 or knowing your rights, but things around labor history and how it connects to the organizing that's going on now, what people can learn about that, as well as thinking about how worker organizers, worker organizations can work in coalition with community organizations to build stronger fights that expand beyond union membership to people who are users of public services or people who care about things that are going on right now, and bringing in and expanding the base for these fights.
And those are all things that we are going to be having at the Troublemaker School next week. And another one that you didn't mention that I wanted to call attention to is the the panel that's on race and labor. I think that's something that's important for us to talk about in the South, how racism, affects workers in the workplace coming from the boss, and how those systems can even infect our unions, and how we can fight against that, and how we can build trust and solidarity among our coworkers and among our fellow union members. And these are all, so we've got from the workshop perspective, we've got a really broad range, and in Alabama next week, and then at these troublemaker schools across the country, from super nuts and bolts. How do I organize a union? What are some of the first steps? How do I be a good shop steward? How do I organize as a shop steward? To zooming out, broader conversations about building coalitions in the community, about, fighting these larger structures of racism and sexism and things like that. And these are all, really important stuff. And there's going to be speeches from union activists in Alabama. Mustafa Hassan from the CWA here in Huntsville is going to be speaking. Hayden Wright, of course, is going to be very familiar to anybody that's, remotely following labor struggles in Alabama. Isaiah Thomas, from the RWDSU, the Amazon Union in Bessemer. So lots of stuff for you if you're a worker. If you're a worker in Alabama, there's going to be a lot of stuff for you here at this Troublemaker School a week from today. And so, Joe, let's talk about the relationship building portion of this. What are some of the things that you have seen come out of other Troublemaker schools in the past and other locations that, y'all at Labor Notes are really proud of as far as building relationships among working people across industries and across jobs?
Yeah. So, these things range from totally informal to more formal in terms of the types of connections that get built. So at the baseline level, I think for people who are newer to the labor movement or more isolated in their corner of the labor movement, I've just seen a lot, this real light bulb, eye-opening moment that feels really powerful, of people realizing, whoa, other people are facing the challenges that I'm facing. I can feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, trying to get my grievances heard or what have you. And there are other people out there who are facing this too. It's not just some individual failing of mine. And I can learn from some of these people. I can share phone numbers with these people and call them up when I'm having a problem. So I think that is one of the most powerful things that happens there. I think that some of the other types of connections that get made, I remember we did a Troublemaker school in New Orleans in 2019. It was the first time we had done one there. And there were two groups of unionists who came from two different unions who realized that they represented workers at the same facility, who in different parts of the same facility. And one of these groups was a newly elected set of officers, reform officers and a local. And they sat down, they spent the entire lunchtime sitting off by themselves, coordinating, scheming, and left with some plans to really try and coordinate how to take the fight to that employer in a way that it hadn't been done before. And these connections are, ones that sometimes we would hope would already be made, but aren't. And that's part of what this can do, right? We're going to be doing a Troublemaker school in New York City later this year. And there are negotiations going on right now covering several 100,000 union members, public sector union members in New York City across a series of unions. And we're going to be hosting conversations where they can get together and talk with one another across these unions about what are their strategies, how are they pushing for more democratic processes within their unions, some of which are really undemocratic and anti-democratic in a lot of ways. And those connections are just ones that often don't happen anywhere else. And so it isn't necessarily about, coming out with a formal coalition or people having formed some sort of new organization. But if people come out of things like this with a plan to keep talking to one another and having made some of those connections in their head that the next time this problem comes up, this is the person who I'm going to reach out to. I think that's a valuable addition.
Right. And this is something that's incredibly important if, like you said, opening the show, if we are genuinely interested in building a labor movement as opposed to having individual silos where maybe we do or maybe we don't win some things in this workplace or that workplace, but instead, rather than in addition to that, actually building a movement of working people that can fight for one another. You know what? I've been on the picket line with those folks that are locked out down in South Alabama at the paper mill the past few days, and somebody, you know, one of the folks I was talking to was kind of interested in why I would, you know, drive 5 hours down south to be on the picket line with them and you know, talk to them and support them and help them try to get their story out. And you know, it's because I genuinely believe, like deep down, that when workers win, when one group of workers win, we all win. And when one group of workers get hurt, we all get hurt. And in a bunch of different ways. And I think that these Labor Notes Troublemaker schools, the conference that y'all do, the low bar to entry, $30 registration fee, the broad range of folks that y'all bring to these Troublemaker schools for both as panelists and facilitators and as attendees, I think it really facilitates that type of understanding.
Yeah, and I think a really important piece about that is that these are inherently local events. So while we do them all over the place, right? There's, as we speak, one is happening in the Twin Cities in Minnesota right now. 300 people are getting together for this. It's different, right? The one that's happening in the Twin Cities is going to be different than the one that's happening in Alabama because what's going on in the Twin Cities is different. There are things that are applicable across those, right? Basic organizing skills, these are important, but we're not parachuting in a bunch of professional organizers from all over the country to come and tell you all how to organize. The thing that we're facilitating is, you know, bringing together people who are organizing where they're at and trying to get them to connect with one another. And I think that that's really important, right? Because
all the people
Labor
that are
Notes
facilitating
is a small organization.
All the people that are facilitating these panels, these workshops, doing these speeches, they're almost all from Alabama. There's one Starbucks worker from Georgia that's going to be speaking, and there's a couple people from Labor Notes staff, but the vast, like 95% of the people that are doing this stuff, they're from Alabama, or at least the South more broadly. And so this is, you know, it's definitely a local event. It's not people, you know, coming and parachuting in and telling us how to do things. It's us, y'all are facilitating us talking to each other.
Yeah, and I think that makes it all the more powerful for figuring out what to do after this, right? Then really facilitates more of those connections that we were talking about.
Absolutely. Adam, did you have anything else that you wanted to add or ask him about before we let Joe go?
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to throw out there. Really excited about Labor Notes coming to Alabama. This is the second time that I'm aware of that there's been an Alabama Troublemaker school. Jacob, you and I and David Sorey happened to be at one a few years ago, which, you know, had we not had that conversation and sat at that table that day, who knows if I would be on the show. Right? So that's just one practical example of how the connections you make and the conversations you have can have a lasting impact. And a couple other things I wanted to just flesh out. It is a local event, and the folks who have been planning this event, by and large, are the local folks who are going to be panelists and trainers and volunteers. So couldn't do it without Louise and without Courtney, without Joe, the folks at Labor Notes who've been doing this work. But you know, it's been volunteers also providing input, helping to set the agenda, volunteering to be trainers. So love to see that, and want to emphasize a couple other things. One, if you are a union member, Joe mentioned it earlier, you know, maybe you're not in the good graces of your leadership, or maybe you have critiques of your union. This is a safe space for you to get training as a unionist and have those conversations, and be willing to have criticism. I think that's one of the great things about a Labor Notes event, as opposed to something more official and sponsored by the institutions themselves, is that you can have more of that open dialogue. And the other thing I wanted to make sure we mention, you guys mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if you are not a union member, and maybe starting a union's not really even on your horizon right now, but you are active in the community in some way. Maybe you are active in Black Lives Matter, you're active in other social justice causes. This event is open to you. This event is for you as much as anything else. For one thing, for the connections you're going to make, but also a lot of the organizing training and skills that we're going to be working on translate into your community organizing that you're working on and the other projects that you have going on. So I know a couple of ladies in Huntsville had told me they're coming. They're not really union people, but they're activist people. They're staples of the activist scene here in Huntsville, and I'm really excited to see them come, bring that community activism background, and while they learn more about labor and we learn more about them. So I think that's going to be a great thing, and just want to really highlight that. So if you're listening, you're involved in any way in the community, or you want to know how to get involved in the community, you need to be there Saturday the 15th in Montevallo. Don't miss it.
Yeah, we've got 125 people registered as of yesterday, and I think it'd be pretty cool to get it to 200. So
absolutely. And if you cannot attend, you can still help. Go on Facebook, find the event, invite all your friends.
Yeah.
Everyone you know on your friends list who's remotely interested in labor or making the world a better place in some capacity, send them an invite, shoot them a message. You can help out that way.
And you can find it at labornotes.org/events. labornotes.org/events. Joe, anything else that you want to add?
Really excited about this. I think it's going to be great, and really excited to see what comes out of it.
Yep, I think so too. Joe Demanuelle-Hall, staff organizer for Labor Notes, talking about the Alabama Troublemakers School next week, Saturday, October the 15th at the University of Montevallo from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Going to be an after party at Zapapan's Mexican restaurant afterwards. Folks, you don't want to miss it. $30 registration, labornotes.org/events. Joe, thanks for taking your time.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Appreciate it.
We're going to go to a break really quick. On the other side, we're going to be talking about Amazon locations catching fire across the country, including here in Huntsville, Alabama. We're going to be talking to Bobby Watson, president of one of the locals at the paper mill that is locked out, the workers at the paper mill that are locked out down in South Alabama.
Looking forward to that for sure.
Yep, you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
Come on, take your trade wherever you like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3140.
This is the Valley Labor Report. I'm hearing an echo. I don't know what's going on there. But this is Alabama's... Oof. What's going on? Yeah, I think maybe... Bobby, I think maybe you've got us on YouTube in the background. You're going to want to turn that off so that we don't... so that we don't hear ourselves back. But this is Alabama's only union talk radio program, The Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Our next guest is Bobby Watson, president of United Steelworkers Local 971, which represents production workers at the WestRock paper mill outside of Fort Mitchell, Alabama, in Cottonton, Alabama. Bobby, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Jacob, good to see you again. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, you know, it's funny. I think you have been engrossed in this lockout for the past week. And I have as well. I had a piece go out on the Real News last week talking about it. And so there are a lot of folks that already have an understanding of what's going on. But for people that are listening to us on the radio, we didn't actually get to tell them, we weren't actually able to lay out the situation for them last week. So there are probably people that are listening to us on the radio that have no understanding of what's going on at this paper mill, of what has been going on, what the company is doing. So we're going to kind of back up a little bit from some of the conversations that we've been having, just to lay a little bit of foundation for people that are brand new to this conversation about this lockout that's happening down in Cottonton, Alabama. So first, help us get an understanding of what goes on in this paper mill. What do y'all do?
Okay, so we're located down on the Chattahoochee River, in between Eufaula and Phoenix City, Alabama. And our paper mill started up in December of 1966, which was originally a Georgia-Alabama craft mill. And then it changed to Mead coated board. And then from there, we went to a Mead West Vaco, when Mead and West Vaco Corporation merged. And so now we are currently WestRock, which is the combination of Mead West Vaco and Rock 10 Corporation. So we're a consumer mill. We make consumer packaging paper. It's a coated natural craft, we call it, ranging anywhere from 16 caliper all the way up to about a 30 caliper. So we produce packaging for beer cartons, cereal boxes, any kind of product that's packaged in that kind of paper.
And this location, this mill, is right south of Fort Benning, a little bit east of or a little bit west of the Columbus area, Columbus, Georgia. Is that right?
That's correct. So the labor force there consists of some people from, like you said, all from Phoenix City, Columbus, Eufaula area, Fort Mitchell, Fort Benning area, some as far out as even Opelika. So it's a big swath of the population there in this area.
And I saw from a local, I saw from a local newscast that that the Mahrt Mill, owned by WestRock, is the largest employer in Russell County. So
yes.
this really affects a lot of people. And so, working in this mill, what are the kind of dangers that y'all encounter when you're working in this mill?
So for someone that has never worked in the paper industry or a paper mill, I can remember when I first walked into that mill back when I was 26 years old, and was kind of taken back at the massive size of the equipment and all that entailed. So there's lots of ropes that carry the paper through the machinery, lots of big giant rolls with lots of nip and crush points, calendar stacks, and lots of high pressure steam for the drying, lots of chemicals. It's a dangerous place to work. But it's becoming a safer place to work through all the innovation and applications toward keeping people safe. Used to, you could recognize a paper maker in one of these mills because they were usually missing a limb or something. But
I've seen a few people on the picket line this. I've seen a few people on the picket line this week that was missing some fingers, at least.
Yeah, so it's a dangerous place to work, and that's one of the reasons that the salaries in these mills are like they are. Because of that, it's such a dangerous place to work, and then you work these shift schedules that are very demanding on people. So
right, and let's get into that a little bit, because one of the things that frustrated me about and I think a lot of your members about some of the local news coverage is they would state your salaries, which are, they're fine. They're put y'all solidly kind of in the middle class, a good blue collar manufacturing type job, that kind of salary. But it's, y'all aren't making $200,000, $250,000, $500,000 a year, right? Y'all are still definitely, just working people. And they were quoting this like, oh, these are such good paying jobs, whatever, without giving people an understanding of the danger that you put yourselves in, and without giving people an understanding of the hours that you work. So y'all work what you call a, quote, reverse Southern swing. Tell the audience what that shift schedule looks like.
So at Mahrt, we work the reverse Southern swing. And so typically what that is, or what that actually looks like, is your shift rotation starts on a Wednesday night at midnight. So you'll go to work and you'll start that Wednesday night at midnight, and you'll work 7 days in a row. Excuse me. You'll work 7 days in a row. So you get off work that Wednesday morning, right? And then you'll be off that Wednesday, and then you'll be off that Thursday, and then your second rotation, which is your evening shift, starts on that Friday at 4 p.m. So you'll work 7 days in a row on that evening shift, 4 to 12 p.m. So you'll get off work that following Thursday at midnight, and then you'll get the next day, Friday. That's your one off day in between your evening and your day shift. So you'll come in Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and you'll start your day shift, and that runs all the way through Friday, 7 more days. And that's when you get off at 4 p.m. on Friday, that's what they call your long weekend. So that's your one weekend off a month. So you'll get off that Friday afternoon, and then you won't report back to Wednesday at midnight, and you'll start the rotation all over again. But if you never ever work that schedule, by the way, so these the staffing levels and everything in these mills are such that most of the time you're working 12-hour shifts. So these 7 days in a row that you find yourselves working are mostly 12-hour shifts. So by the time your long weekend rolls around, you're pretty wore out, and it's just a cycle, over and over and over again. So you just miss a lot, right? You miss a lot of living, you miss a lot of life, because you're pouring yourself into these meals, and kind of what you alluded to. Yeah, the salaries are a little above average compared to some of the other wages you see in the industries around us, but that's the kind of the trade-off, right? That's the sacrifice for doing these kinds of jobs. So you make that little extra, to be able to send your kid to college, or, take that nice vacation with the family. And then, maybe put back a little more toward retirement than the average person could do.
Right. But, like you said, that's the trade-off, is that, there were some folks when I was down there that told me, that you're able to, the trade-off is that basically you provide financially for your family, but you're not, in a lot of cases it becomes much more difficult, or you are not as able to provide, emotional and physical and being present type support. You're able to give them a good living, your family, maybe your wife is able to stay home, which is not a luxury that a lot of people have anymore, and so they're very thankful for that. But then the wife is able to stay home, but the husband is almost never there, or it's a lot more difficult for them to be there than other people. And this trade-off over the last 4 or 5 contracts has become less appealing to people, because over the last 4 or 5 contracts, they have been continuing to take and not keep raises up with inflation, take a little bit there, take a little bit here, and that is what has led to your short staffing problem. Folks told me that y'all are about 100 people short, and that's why you're the people that are still there having to work these 12-hour, these 16-hour, sometimes more more hour shifts. And that and then on top of this, they're trying to take even more from you. And so finally, y'all just said enough is enough. But it seems almost from a business standpoint, they're having such a hard time getting people in the door now as it is. How is it not anything but good for their business model to keep what y'all have in this contract at least, if not make it better? Because obviously they're having trouble recruiting people.
Yeah, I scratch my head at this company's decision to bring this fight to our mill at this time, right? Doesn't make absolutely any sense. So you're absolutely correct. The shortage that we see in our staffing are unheard of. We haven't seen it this bad. I mean, they've always understaffed. The way the corporation looks at this, Jacob, is that 18 to 20% of overtime for employees is acceptable to them because they limit the roll-up, what they call roll-up cost, to adding more employees. So we all understand how that works. You add employees, so then you got the benefits, you got all the wages, everything that goes along with adding that other employee. So they kind of try to find a balance towards their staffing levels to where they don't have those additional roll-up costs and they're still able to get things done. So typically that balance is somewhere between 18 and 20%. So, but what we've been seeing at our mill is those overtime levels have been exceeding 40%, twice, what the normal. So they've clearly understaffed, and they haven't been addressing it. And we've been after them for quite some time, and folks have just been so out of balance that they've had enough of it, especially with this latest contract offer that's clearly having us take concessions.
Right. And so let's talk about the concessions that they're trying to get y'all to accept. Of course, in this contract, they have maintained the concessionary raises, they're just 2% annual raises, which is really not common in today's inflationary environment. But in addition to that, they're trying to take away what y'all call in the industry hog law and your Sunday penalty pay. Explain to us what those two provisions are.
Okay, so the contract language that they're trying to actually buy from our union members here that run this mill are actually protections. They're supposed to be deterrents from the corporation, overworking an employee. And so those language protections are centered around the over 16, the over 24, the holiday, and working on Sunday language. And what that states is that if you work an individual 7 days a week, right, and you work him on Sunday, then Sunday is paid at time and a half. So the over 16 language says that if you work an employee over 16 hours, then you're going to back up and you're going to pay that employee overtime rate from the very first hour he came into work until he's had an 8-hour period of rest. And the same thing with the 24-hour language, it operates the same way, right? So if something comes up in the mill and you say, hey, I need you to stay, then he's paid at overtime rate, time and a half, for every hour he's been at work during that 24-hour period until he's had an 8-hour rest period off from work. Those penalties exist because they shouldn't, and even both sides agree, right, that they shouldn't be working individuals these kinds of hours. And those penalties are there, so when those things happen, everybody recognizes that should be done. There is language in our contract that says that you can't be forced to work over 16 hours, right? So when the company comes to an employee and says, whatever's going on, that they need their expertise to stay, to keep the mill running, then that's the penalty that they pay, right? So that person makes that extra money, and rightfully so. So now the corporation, WestRock, comes in and says, well, we just want to eliminate that language. We no longer want to abide by these penalties if these situations arise and we have to work these employees these excessive hours, which our labor union thinks is absolutely ludicrous, right? Because it's completely under their control. You're the one that controls the staffing of the mill. So look, staff the mill, and this language isn't a problem. And if it does come up that you need some certain employee's expertise to get us out of a jam or to keep production rolling, then that person's entitled to that money, right?
Right.
You've kept them there all them hours. We really don't understand why we're even fighting over this stuff, to be honest with you. Where it gets tricky is the Sunday language. So most paper mills years past, they all had this language, right? That says Sunday, you're going to get paid at rate plus 1/2 just because it's Sunday. Mm-hmm. So they've systematically started eliminating this type of language out of labor agreements with these other paper industries for years. I think they said since the 1990s, I think. So what we've been telling the corporation is that Mahrt and Mahrt's families and Mahrt's communities in the surrounding area still hold Sunday as a special day, right? We don't think that we should be working. We should be spending that time with our families. So if you require us to work that day, then that's going to be paid at that rate plus 1/2. They're wanting to eliminate that language. They tell us that Sunday is just another day. So they don't think they should pay that penalty anymore for you working on Sundays. Right. So somehow over the years, their view has changed. So this language has been in our contract for a long time, and like we just stated, it's been in other contracts in the industry as well, and it's being bought off. So Mahrt's simply standing up and saying, look, this language isn't for sale. We still hold these things to be dear. We still think that's the way it should be in America, right? I mean,
well, yeah, and
for all the
and
reasons
something
that you stated earlier.
Right, and something that you've told me is that when you work somebody 7 days a week without any rest in a 7-day period, there should be a penalty to be paid for that, and I think that that's very reasonable. And this hog law stuff is to, you said that both sides agree, you don't want people working over 16 hours, and they're already working people over 16 hours, asking people to work 16 hours and more sometimes. And you've said that over 40%, so we're getting close to half of the hours in this mill are overtime hours, which is just not acceptable. And management and the executives are clearly not doing their part, right? Presumably management is supposed to be doing something. They're supposed to be working somehow. And it seems like part of that job would be you keep the thing staffed, and they're not able to do that right now. And so the worry is that if y'all remove these penalties for working people 7 days in a row, if you remove these penalties for working people over 16 hours, that they're just going to do it even more. And that seems like a reasonable worry. And, that it shows that this is clearly not about just the money, because they offered y'all a $28,000 ratification bonus in this, total. There's stuff here, some buyouts here, and some signing bonuses, and you add all that up, and it was $28,000 if you accepted these concessions, lump sum, one check. And y'all turned that down because you said no, and you turned it down resoundingly, like 90-something% of the people voted it down. Because you're like, no, our time away from work is important, and we're worried that you're going to take more of it if we give you this language. And so you turned it down, and the company locked y'all out on Thursday. How have, in the, we're about, I guess, 48 hours out from the lockout, what's the fallout been from that? How have your members been responding? And I don't know how many stories y'all are getting, kind of from the inside of the mill, the salary people, or how much y'all would want to tell us. But what's the fallout been like for your members and the running of the mill?
So let me say, first of all, I was just humbled at the response from our membership, right? To just overwhelmingly say no thank you to the money that the corporation was throwing at them to buy our contract language, right? So that screams that all of us are being overworked and we're tired of it. And it's not about the money. It's about these language protections and our values and what we stand for, and they need to stay in that contract, because we look to this labor agreement as both a social and an economic agreement between, right, the people and the employer. And so it's a two-way street. And so there should be balance there. Once the company decided to lock us out Thursday morning, of course, it was a somber kind of, people were just, man, I've been working in this mill for 30 years plus, right? And they just couldn't believe it, right? That an employer would take that kind of position over them with what was on the table, right? The issues that were on the table, just refusing to talk about it. So once the shock got over and everybody rallied on the streets and then now continue, we got our picket schedule up and running, and so they're making the most out of that. I mean, you're seeing families and kids and children, and so they're starting to have fun with it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's growing into a realization that we're locked out of our mill, we don't have a paycheck coming in. But wow, we're connecting with people throughout our mill. I mean, there's 467 of us. We all work in the same area. So now we've got a chance to, mingle with one another, people we don't have normal day-to-day contact, meet their families, and have a good time, eat meals together. We're grilling, hot dogs and hamburgers, and we're just making the most of it. And we're hoping at some point that the company will come around to their senses, right? One thing interesting, in our 15 hours before this corporation decided to lock our employees out, they called for an important meeting. So we all showed up, and they just was the only thing they were really interested in was the union ready to just give in, right? And give up. So I looked to our plant manager and I told him, I said, listen, you have got a golden opportunity right here. I have never, ever seen this mill this united. You have a golden opportunity to turn this into something very positive, depending on what direction that you decide to take. I mean, we could literally be breaking production records right now, as unified as this mill is, and if they were just to take, one step in the right direction here on these issues, but instead they're just obviously not going to do that, and he's going to go down a different road. And my fear is just cause irreparable damage to the relationship between the corporation and the employees in this community, right? And these families. It's a sad thing, and I just don't understand why they look at it this way. They get upset, when we're talking to them in negotiations and we refer to this meal as our meal, right? They remind me, no, this is our meal, right? So we get that it's their assets, right? But we're the group of people in there making this thing go, right? Making these people millions of dollars of profit. And we're a very good team together. We're very efficient. That mill runs like a sewing machine, right? 97% efficiencies. This mill is a moneymaker for these people. And it's because that all of us take ownership in it, right? We're good at what we do. And we make the sacrifices with our homes and stay out there and keep this place going, and it's worked. And now they're just they want to tear all that down, just to squeeze the margins a little bit more, so they can dump more money in the pockets.
Right, and that's the thing is that they don't even have any, any sort of economic justification for this. Maybe back in the 70s and the 80s, we could some of the things that the manufacturing folks were and the the industries and the unions were butting heads about was that there was legitimate compression in the industry, right? And that's just not the case. That is not the case at all with WestRock. They made $3.4 billion last year. Their CEO last year got a 300% raise and a $1.5 million bonus. This is just not a company that needs to ask its workers. There is no need at this company for the workers to sacrifice. There's none at all because it's doing so well. And you talked about the unity that y'all are having in your shop at Mahrt Mill, and you've also seen a lot of support from other WestRock union members across the country. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so we've been contacted by just about every mill in the WestRock organization offering their support. Many of them have wrote scathing letters to our CEO, right, in support of the Mahrt location. And so, you're seeing this ripple effect all over the entire organization, where people are standing up for this fight. A lot of these locations were in this fight before us, and they agreed to deals where they sold this same type of language that we're fighting to keep in our contract now. And every time I talk to one of these presidents in one of these other locations, the message is the same. Bobby, that was a terrible mistake, right? We never should have done it. And so this thing has just come full circle. And now, like I said, the WestRock Corporation has brought this fight to Mahrt, and Mahrt's simply standing up and saying, no, thank you, right? It's not about the money. It's about the protections that we offer, we have in our contract agreement, right? Sunday's not just another day here in this area, in this community, in the lives of our families. It just puzzles me that corporate America has adopted the position that, Sunday's just another work day for their workforce, right? Hey, you look back in these old contract agreements, and those ideals used to be important, not only to us as families and neighbors and friends, but it also used to be important to business leaders, right? And they took care of their employees. They understood that. And that was just a trade-off. And as long as everybody's profitable and everybody's good, that's exactly right. And I'm gonna work this man on Sunday, then I'm gonna pay him a little bit extra, right? Where have those ideas gone with these people at the top now?
Right.
And I've asked them myself when I've had the opportunity to sit down and eat lunch, what's changed with you guys at the top? I mean, you'd like to think, Jacob, that these people that run these corporations, these distinguished individuals, if you want to refer to them as that they should, they're supposed to be the ones that have arrived, right? So they're supposed to hold dear those important ideals and integrity and character that leaders should exhibit, right? And so they're the ones that should understand the most how important these things are to families and the American fabric, right, of society. Like me and you spoke earlier, and I alluded to this, right? You hear all this chatter way up top in these boardrooms and these people that making millions of dollars, and they want to talk about the moral decay of America and all the ills that you see here, right? And at the same time, they pass this garbage back down to the working man, right? And just Sunday's just another day, folks, right? So they say one thing and then you see them doing another, right?
Right. Well, Bobby, I know that we're rooting for you up here in Huntsville. Is there anything that our listeners can do to support y'all right now?
So yeah, just get out there on the social media any way you can, right? And send the message to corporate America that, you know, this is about more, and this is about our families. This is about what's important and about life, right? In general. And it's wrong for these corporations to be sucking all these millions of dollars up at the top and keeping it up there. Everybody has heard on the news and everywhere else, they always talk, you see this big disparity, right, between the corporate elites and the working guy, and how it's been growing over the years. So this fight right here is just another example of that, right? They just want to reach in the pockets of the working man, take from him, and pass it back up to the big bankers and the shareholders and put it in their pockets. This WestRock Corporation, by the way, has already got a ROE, that's a return on investment, so that it's already between 7 and 10% now, with things just like they are. So this attack on our mill isn't hurting their bottom line, not one penny. So I would just ask that everybody join in this fight, blast them out. Send a clear message that what they're doing is wrong, and support us.
Bobby Watson, president of USW Local 971, representing production workers at the Mahrt Mill paper mill in Cottonton, Alabama. Thank you for taking the time today. Oh, really quick, I'm sorry. Mel asked if do y'all have a 2-tier wage structure over there?
No.
We don't. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Bobby, thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you for your struggle as well. We're going to be cheering you on from North Alabama.
Yeah.
Thank you much. I'll keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to a break really quick, and we're going to be right back talking about locations catching fire in Huntsville, Alabama. Stay tuned.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer,
and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We just wrapped up a conversation with Bobby Watson, president of the Steelworkers Local 971, representing production workers at the Mahrt Mill paper mill in Cottonton, Alabama. You know, sometimes there's some weird people on the internet. If you have a title next to your name in a union, they're like, oh, these are union bureaucrats. These are people that, you know, just suck money from member dues or whatever. Bobby is a worker. And in many unions across the country, the local officers are all shop floor workers, and they take some time from their job to do their union duties, and they take some time that they volunteer after hours, a lot of time, especially in times like this. Bobby and some of the other leadership of those 3 unions down there, they've been sleeping at the union hall. And they don't have a fancy bed. Their union hall is just a double-wide trailer down there. So it's not, you know, they ain't got this big fancy thing. Union officers spend a lot of time for their members. The good ones do. And it's not like it's a bad thing if you're staff on a union either, at all. But, you know,
there is a misconception.
Yeah, there's a misconception there for sure that all officers are paid staff, and that's just not the case. That's not the case at all.
Yeah, I believe there were folks on the internet who believed that you were like an AFL-CIO employee.
Yeah.
Because you had been elected secretary-treasurer of the local labor council.
Yep.
Not the way it works, folks.
Not the way it works. Amazon warehouses have been catching fire across the country, including right here in Huntsville. In fact, the Amazon facility in Madison,
happened twice,
which is called HSV1, caught fire twice.
That's wild.
In as many weeks. It was literally the first shift that they opened that section of the facility back up. It caught fire again. WAFF was on the scene talking to workers last week as the building was burning.
By the way, credit to WAFF for their coverage on this article.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. Yeah, they do some good stuff. So this is from the article from WAFF. Quote, the employees amongst others, are starting to feel a sense of fear and distrust as they waited outside for answers and updates. It even gave the employees time to draft a theory as to what caused the fire. Quoting from one of the workers, "It's just funny that last Monday our warehouse caught on fire in the same area," the employee said. "I was told from other employees as we were sitting out there wondering what in the heck was going on, they said boxes caught on fire. So they're thinking maybe lithium batteries. And then a majority of us, we don't feel safe. I mean, we think they sent us back to work too soon." And I think they're certainly right to be feeling distrustful. Friend of the show, Isaiah Thomas, is a lead organizer with the Amazon Union in Bessemer, Alabama. And folks, he tweeted this out on Twitter. If there's anybody that saw his tweet or that's listening to the show that works at a Huntsville Amazon facility or in any Amazon facility, but particularly with, what's been going on in Huntsville in the past couple of weeks, particularly if you work at a Huntsville facility, reach out to him. And if you don't know him, you probably don't. You can reach out to us, and we will get you in touch with him. But if you're interested in doing something about the way that you're being treated, you should reach out. I can get you in touch with them, and y'all can start getting to work forming a union in Huntsville and start protecting yourself, because clearly this company isn't going to do it. And I'll give you my phone number. My phone number is 256-426-3358. That's my personal cell phone number. If you're a Huntsville Amazon worker or you know somebody that works there, feel free to get in touch with me at my personal cell phone number, 256-426-3358. You can also reach out to us on Facebook and Twitter. You can direct message our show, and we'll help you get in touch. Because this is important. This is like literally life and death type stuff that we're talking about, not just from, it's less likely that you're going to burn alive, but that could happen, but the smoke inhalation is extremely, extremely dangerous. Chemical inhalation, you start burning crazy stuff over there that can really be detrimental to your health. And look, folks, it's not just you. It's not just you in Huntsville. Amazon warehouses have much higher injury rates than industry standard.
Right.
Across the board. And then the same day that a Huntsville warehouse caught fire, a Staten Island warehouse caught fire. The folks up there are unionized. They won their union election, and they exercised their right that they have in this country to refuse unsafe work, and they walked off the job, over 100 of them. Then the night shift came in because they were told that they still had to report to work, and instead of reporting to work, they stayed just sit in at a safe location. 650 of them. Subsequently, at least 50 of them were suspended. And then the next day, a fire broke out at an Albany Amazon location. And you may think, oh, these people were suspended. This means that we shouldn't organize. And that is not right. That's not right. The only way to protect yourself from unjust suspensions and from unsafe working conditions is to organize. To get so many Amazon facilities in Huntsville, in New York, and across the country organized that Amazon doesn't have that power anymore. That they can't willy-nilly fire people for refusing unsafe working conditions. So it's an imperative that you organize in Huntsville and across the country. So we're going to leave you with that. We're going into overtime, and we're going to be playing an interview that Adam did with Zach Hayden about some of the stuff that he's doing down there. Going to be talking about some other stories. Stay tuned. And we're off the radio. We're off the radio, folks. We are in overtime now. Overtime is the second half of the show where we go for a whole another hour and a half usually. I think we're going to be cutting it a bit short today. But we go for another hour and a half online only. It's like special bonus content, but it's still free. You can support the show, help us continue doing this on our website, TVLR.fm. We're going to take a break really quick. We've got a couple of news stories that I wanted to get to in overtime. There was a pregnant worker that was fired in an Auburn GE plant, and I wanted to talk just a bit about about our president, Joe Byron, legalizing marijuana, and whether or not that's exactly what happened. So we're going to take a really quick break. We're going to come back with overtime, hit a couple of stories really quick, and then we'll play this interview with Zach that we've got. So stay tuned, folks.
And just as a preview, the interview with Zach, we are going to talk a little bit about the Automotive Free Clinic in Prattville, as well as some other projects he has in the works. He's got a new podcast coming out. But the second half of the conversation is about the South, the American South, and how we stack up across the country and how we relate to the rest of the world, particularly the global South, those imperialized countries. And so if you're at all interested in the South and Southern identity and even, the identity of a redneck, I think you'll find this conversation interesting.
Yep. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back with overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show. My name is Jacob Morrison. I am your host. My co-host is Adam Keller.
Hey, folks.
We always appreciate folks in the chat watching us live. We've got Mel Sutton in the Facebook chat, Mark Brooks. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm sure we've got Joe out there. And Mel, I appreciate you jogging my memory about that question that you wanted asked about the two-tier wage structure. I had totally forgotten about that. But that's a very interesting thing that they don't have the two-tier there. I wonder what the industry standard in the paper mill industry is right now as far as two-tier goes.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to find out, and I know you're working on more reporting on that issue. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate Mel's question there, because I think certainly with the time premiums that you discussed, that contract language, that's a historic victory.
Right.
That they're trying to hold on to, that other folks have lost. And with the two tiers, that's a defeat that so many other industries and unions have suffered that they have yet to experience.
Yeah, but you know what? I have talked to a lot of people in the paper industry reporting on this, and I have just not heard, and you know, Mel, you and I can talk offline about this, but I have not heard anything about two tiers from anybody in the paper industry. So I wonder if, I don't know.
Maybe it just
I wonder
hasn't
if
infected it yet.
Yeah, so I don't know. In the YouTube chat, Austin says, howdy, everyone. Infinite Content says, good morning. We appreciate y'all. Marissa Allison mentions that strippers from the Star Garden Topless Dive Bar in L.A. have been granted a union election by the NLRB. Incredibly cool stuff.
I knew they were working on it. I didn't know that they had officially gotten the election scheduled.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I saw that last week, I think, and Kim Kelly has been doing some good reporting on that. She's got a good section in her book about chapter about sex workers broadly defined that Adam mentioned in the chat. Infinite Content also says that the workers at the Philadelphia Museum of Art are also on strike.
They've been on strike for quite some time.
Yeah, for quite some time, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art is doing some fancy fundraising stuff with these scabs. It's crazy.
That's disgusting.
Jared says, when we were talking about the Troublemaker School, Jared says that there's going to be a couple folks from the Engineering Association at NASA, the IFPTE Local 27, including their new VP, which is Jared. Congratulations, Jared.
Oh, yeah.
We need to get a soundboard. I need to get myself like a soundboard or something to put here so I can have like a maybe like a shofar like they do on the majority.
Yeah, every time one of our listeners wins union office.
Yeah.
Folks are taking over.
Yeah, but that's really awesome. Really happy for you, Jared.
Yeah,
Going to do great
absolutely.
things. He said he's trying to get some folks from North Alabama DSA and Love Huntsville so down to the Troublemaker School, so that's going to be great.
Absolutely.
And Infinite Content says, when I was talking to Bobby about those shifts, that those are insane, and that they are indeed insane. It's crazy. Infinite Content also asks if Teamsters transport materials to the plant. And I don't know about materials, but UPS drivers with the Teamsters do deliver material to the plant, and they said that they will not. Teamsters Local 612 down there, representing UPS workers in that area, have said they will not cross the picket line. That's very cool. There have been some building trades contractors that have said they will not cross the picket line. That's very cool. And there have been some building trades contractors that are unionized, quote unquote, that are crossing the picket line. So that's another thing that I'm going to be trying to dig more into as I do more reporting about this, because that is not cool, to say the least. Not cool at all, to say the least. Infinite Content asks, how is OSHA and the state's Department of Labor not investigating all these locations? And Jared mentions that state-level DOLs, especially in red state, are highly unlikely to pursue things not affecting companies' bottom lines. OSHA is notoriously starved of any reasonable budget, and Ron asks if Terry Crews is still working for Amazon. Totally agree, Jared. And Ron, I'm not sure.
Regulatory capture is the name of the game, especially in a place like Alabama. But I absolutely agree. when you have two fires in the exact same location, a week or two apart?
Yeah, there should be an investigation.
There should be outside
should be.
investigation.
Maybe something
line.
for the Attorney General.
I know. Yeah, he's always eager to get on TV and get on the news cycle. He could try actually investigating something legitimate for a change.
Right. So let's talk about this pregnant worker in Auburn. Brynetta Talley. Brynetta Talley is 31 years old. She has worked, and I'm reading this from these. AL.com broke this story. The reporter is Sarah Swetlick. She did a really good job. I would recommend reading this article by Sarah Swetlick. In AL.com, the title is Pregnant Woman Files Unfair Labor Charge Against GE Auburn Plant. Quote, it was just awful. So,
and also want to mention John Glenn, friend of the show, who's been doing some great reporting on the prison strike. He had an article come out as well, I believe the next day. And he talked about a separate worker who was also terminated.
No kidding.
Not a pregnant woman, just a guy, but he is a pro-union guy who was also fired, supposedly for his pro-union stance. So I'm glad to see both AL Reporter and AL.com covering this story out of Auburn.
Yeah, Sarah Swetlick did a really good job in AL.com, and so I didn't even. I'm gonna have to look at that AL Reporter piece. But this Brynetta Talley is 31, and Sarah said in her article that Brynetta said she worked at this Auburn plant for 6 years. For 6 years, and she won 5 awards during her employment.
Yeah.
For her performance, because she was so good at her job. And she so she, when this union campaign started, back in April, and then they formally announced about a couple of months ago, she was public about her union support, and she says she felt like that made her a prime target, and so her job requires her to lift 50 to 60 pounds at various times throughout the day. And that's a lot, right? I mean, that's not something to sniff at, lifting 50, 60 pounds, especially if you're doing that repeatedly throughout the day.
Right.
And after she told her employer she was pregnant, she was denied opportunities for lighter assignments, which is clearly a violation of, anti-discrimination laws in the United States at the federal level. The ADA violations there are clear, and because she's pregnant, right? You're not supposed to be doing this extremely strenuous activity while you're pregnant.
And something that was reported in John Glenn's piece is that in the plant, it's very common to transfer departments. And they were specifically speaking about the situation with Tyrone Dawkins, who was a second worker terminated for his pro-union stance. But employees there reported that, they couldn't think of another instance where an employee was not allowed to transfer to a different department.
It's
something that it's not an ask that's unheard of. It's a common practice that folks would go from department to department. And so the fact that in the case of this Miss Talley, she's pregnant, she needs some reasonable accommodations, which could easily be met with some different assignment. Yeah. In the case of Tyrone Dawkins, it was an issue where he passed with flying colors the performance test on some areas, but then they wanted to stick him in a department where he had not done so well, and rather than give him the training or a transfer, they used it as justification for termination.
And not only did you mention that it's common that people transfer departments, and so both of these things could have been done for both of these people. Like, not everyone. Right. So in the case of Tyrone, not everyone can do every job. If he aced performance tests, why would you not put him in the part of the facility
where he was
excelling? Like, if that, if I'm getting in the mind of a rational, self-interested libertarian capitalist, right, and I'm trying to think of the most rational thing to do. I want workers in places where they will be the best fit and can make the most money for me.
Right. Where will they be most productive?
And they didn't do that for Tyrone. And then also...
They didn't do it for Miss Tally either, right? Because,
Right.
I mean, common sense would tell you, if I have all these different positions, why would I find the one involving lifting 60-pound bags all day for the pregnant lady?
Right. And so she said, and so not it's common for people to change departments, but there are also some of these departments have light duty options. Not all of the jobs in this facility require you to lift 60 pounds several times a day. And so there's clearly places for her to go. And she said that, she didn't know, she was never given a reason why they were refusing to accommodate her, or anything like that. And that eventually she was suspended for this. She was terminated, and she feels like the only way to explain this is because of her union support. So she filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board. The union is supporting her in this. GE did not. Here's what GE said to AL.com. GE is proud to employ more than 230 people at our Auburn facility, where we are committed to providing and upholding equal opportunity for all our employees. We have zero tolerance for unlawful discrimination or retaliation of any kind, and have a strong record of working with all employees across our global facilities, regardless of representational status. I mean, what a load of horse crap.
Yeah, I wonder how much they paid a lawyer to write that. Couple $100 probably. Write that paragraph.
Yeah, it's insane stuff. And this is, and we were talking to Bobby, this just goes to the depravity of the people at the top of our society. Just really the depraved, the lack of morals, the lack of a conscience. Their souls have been rotted.
Well, I think power is, the old saying that power corrupts. I think that's a truism, and I think that's easily discernible when you look at our economy and the way employers have a hierarchical relationship with employees. And, like you said, if you were just being totally self-interested and rational, you would accommodate these workers because it would actually be better for you as the capitalist, for the running of the facility. But they're not necessarily thinking in that manner. They're thinking of protecting their power and keeping these folks squashed below their boot. And so that is one of the most frustrating things you see, is because, of course, when you go to school, you're taught Econ 101. It's all supply and demand. Capitalists act out of their own rational self-interest to maximize profits. But
that is not the case.
That is not the case. And you see time after time after time, it's not always just about the money. It's not about the money in the paper mill issue. It's about time. Oftentimes it's about respect. It's about having input, having a voice, and employers in some cases are willing to lose money to prevent giving up any ground on those areas. And I think what Bobby was talking about is there's some truth to that. I mean, businesses have always acted like businesses. Bosses are always bosses. But I think there is less and less space these days for businesses to try to be accommodating to workers. Now, well, I mean, I would say maybe that's changing now because of the resurgent labor movement, but that's not, bosses acting altruistically. That's them sensing the tea leaves and trying to provide benefits and pay in order to stave off union drives or to minimize any kind of organizing. But
I did want to mention this, that the AL.com article, before we go on to the next thing, but because it's I meant to mention it earlier, and I just overlooked it. But Sarah Swetlick points out that, quote, Alabama has no state-specific protections against pregnancy discrimination, so employers must defer to federal guidelines. But in 2022, Representative Neil Rafferty, Democrat from Birmingham, introduced the Alabama Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, but it did not move past committee. So here we had a Democrat that was trying to pass protections for pregnant workers in the state of Alabama in an environment where soon Roe versus Wade would be overturned at the behest of people who would say they're pro-life, quote unquote. And why are they pro-life? What does that mean? That means that they reckon, presumably, some of them are probably just lying to you, but some of them really believe that a fetus has the same moral worth as a fully grown human being, and more moral worth and is worthy of more moral consideration than the person carrying the fetus, right? And so if it was really actually a principled position that you had that was, I want to protect fetuses at all costs, it would seem that a law protecting pregnant workers from discrimination in the workplace, a law saying that employers have to accommodate workers who are pregnant, they have to accommodate them, and if there is such a thing, or such a thing that can be created as a light duty assignment that you will be able to perform safely as a pregnant worker, you have to do that as an employer. You would think if you were somebody dedicated to the preservation of fetuses and their health, this would be something that you would support. But that law,
Right.
that bill did not even make it out of committee.
Right.
Didn't even make it out of committee. Who controls the committee? The Republicans. And so, look, it's...
Republicans do love fetuses, but they love employers a hell of a lot more.
They love employers more, and mostly they love fetuses when they can protect them by controlling women.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, you're exactly right, and that's right on. A pregnant workers' fairness, protection, that's if you're in the mood to protect a fetus, one might consider that as maybe relevant.
Right. And this is something that there are differences, right? And we are more than happy to criticize Democrats, and we do it a lot. And we don't talk about, what are Republicans doing, what are Democrats doing. But when issues like this come up in stories, and they're so, you would have to, this is a really great context from Sarah that she puts in this article.
Yeah, I'm glad she mentioned that.
And it punches you in the face, right, in this environment that we're in, and you would have to be foolish not to notice it. And so it's important that Sarah points this out, and I want to make sure that we point it out on our program, because there are differences, and those are important to understand as we go into the ballot booth a month from today on November 8th. The next story is that and this is something I spoke to Dale Jackson on about Friday morning, and he is absolutely apoplectic that Joe Biden is not letting a single person out of jail. He pardoned 6,500 people who were convicted of simple possession of marijuana at the federal level. And none of those people are in jail currently. There's nobody currently serving time for simple possession of marijuana in federal prisons.
Right.
So there's nobody let out of jail for this. This is just basically expunging records.
Which is good.
This is going to, these 6,500 people, which is a very small group of people, but these 6,500 people, this will be a life-changing, their lives were changed for the better at the stroke of a pen.
Right. And literally no one harmed.
Nobody harmed, and that's worth understanding, and that's worth recognizing.
Right.
But it's also worth understanding that nobody was let out of prison for this.
We can appreciate that it's a mostly symbolic move.
Right. So they and he did that, and then after that he said that he asked some department secretary to look into maybe rescheduling marijuana at the federal level.
They're gonna look into beginning the process of reviewing the policy, and apparently they're gonna take a lot of time with this. Means Morning News had a great segment this week. I guess it was yesterday, where they quoted the administration being very clear that they're going to take their time. So this isn't like, presumably, they're not going to reschedule marijuana before Election Day a month from today, is what I interpreted. They could, absolutely could. Should have been done a long time ago. It's absolutely disgusting that marijuana is a Schedule I substance, right up there with
heroin.
I mean, in some ways, you know, crystal meth and fentanyl and heroin have less or have more legality because those can still be
those can still
obtained,
be prescribed,
as prescriptions legally. Whereas, while we do have medical marijuana in various states, multiple states now, it's still federally illegal. I think if I put it on my political hat, it's a very good move for the Democrats. As with any good move with the Democrats, it's more show than substance, and they're going to drag their feet. They're going to let stuff slip through the cracks, et cetera, et cetera. But there is a smart political calculus, I think, to moving towards decriminalization of marijuana in the lead up to these runoffs, because it is overwhelmingly popular, including with Republicans.
And this is absolutely a workers' issue, because who is it that gets convicted of possession or sale
Elon
or
Musk can be on camera and smoke a joint. And he's no one's gonna follow him home. No one's gonna search his car.
Yeah, they can smoke marijuana literally on camera. They can do cocaine bumps in their hotel rooms, at their crazy parties. All these rich people, the bosses, the politicians. Madison Cawthorn was absolutely bodied after he came out talking about politicians doing cocaine orgies in D.C. And look what happened to him, right? So,
and that may have been one of the only halfway factual things he ever said.
And so, look, this is not an issue that affects bosses and politicians. This is an issue that affects working people, and working people only.
Particularly black and brown working people. The facts are very clear that marijuana has been enforced in a discriminatory manner. All aspects of marijuana prohibition. And, something to point out, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but as we slowly but surely transition into a post-prohibition era, I think it's important that these laws be reshaped in a way that does help working people, and that these industries be legalized and regulated in a way that helps working people. What I don't want to see, and what I think is, from what I understand, is happening in some places already where it is legal, is, the hedge funds and the other corporate crooks that run every other industry getting their hands in it.
Right.
And I personally, I was very impressed with Bernie Sanders' marijuana policies during this 2020 run that he had. I don't know if those are still out there somewhere on the web. I'm sure they are. But one of the things he talked about was using the process of marijuana legalization and ending prohibition as a way to bring reparation to the communities that have been harmed by these policies, and to have a more bottom-up approach to this new industry. There's nothing stopping us from having farmer co-ops.
Right. Yeah. The first people that should be given grants to open, pot shops should be people who are getting out of prison for distributing pot. And they've got experience in the industry, right?
And of course, we know for a place like Alabama, that'd probably be the exact opposite approach
Right.
of what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be people like John Boehner.
It's going to
getting
it's going to
rich
be the same handful of wealthy farming families that run your local county commission.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably who's going to get the contracts. But all that said, anyone who in the year of our Lord 2022 believes that someone should be arrested and put in handcuffs for consuming marijuana is an authoritarian and probably batshit.
Yep. All right, we're going to go to this interview that Adam did with Zach Hayden about the Automotive Free Clinic, about the South, about the Global South. Wide-ranging interview, some good stuff. So, Adam, let's go ahead and play that.
Sure thing. All right, you're listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show, where we strive for news and analysis of, by, and for working class people in the South. My name is Adam Keller, and here with me is our next guest, Zach. Zach has previously appeared on the show to discuss his work with the Automotive Free Clinic in the Montgomery area, and Zach is back to update us on his projects, including the Free Clinic and some new ones he's got in the works, and for a broader conversation on the American South. So, Zach, thanks for joining me on the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for having me, Adam. Like you said, my name is Dr. Zach Hayden. I'm the Executive Director of the Automotive Free Clinic, which is a free and low-cost automotive repair shop in Prattville, Alabama. The way we work is we charge parts at commercial cost. We don't mark up the parts, which saves about 45%. And labor is donation based, so you don't have to pay labor. And we keep ourselves afloat with individual grants and donations. So if you would like to make a donation to the cause, we could sure use it. Go to automotivefreeclinic.org and click on How Can I Help? The Automotive Free Clinic has been in business for over 2.5 years. We've repaired 230 or 240 cars. I don't know exactly how many thus far. It's really a small number of cars compared to what a production shop does. But I probably do, as a small nonprofit, I probably do 75% of the work myself. And it's about at the capacity that I could handle at this point in time. When you talk about, keeping the books, marketing, so on and so forth.
Right.
We're open 3 days a week. We're open Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And I think we've done pretty well. We would like to get some more money and expand our operations, but that's for future plans. So. We also have started a network of solidarity economy organizations, which solidarity economy basically means businesses that are for the people. And that network is called the Educational and Economic Resource Organizing Network. And we have the Habitual Bee, which is an urban apiary in Charlotte, North Carolina. Popular Education Summer Camp in the Alabama Appalachians, and a Hometown Organizing Project, which is organizing a farmers market in Camp Hill, Alabama. So we got 4 organizations in that network. I think we're about to add a farming operation in Birmingham, but that's really in the planning stages right now. So
that's fantastic. Could you tell us the name of that again, the network?
The Educational and Economic Resource Organizing Network. And, we're businesses. Some of us are some of us are nonprofits. Some of us are LLCs. We're trying to start some cooperatives. It's just about businesses that are primarily about serving the people and not about making gobs and gobs of profit, though we do want to support ourselves. I mean, we're not completely selfless. We do want to support ourselves, but we're trying to, whether it be food and agriculture or education or automotive repair, we're businesses that meet the needs of the people.
Absolutely. And one of the things we love to talk about on the show is cooperatives. And so I think that's fantastic to see that kind of network growing. And before we move on to some of your other projects, could you tell us, what motivated you to get involved with the Automotive Free Clinic and take some leadership there? And, what's been how's it felt to do this work?
Yeah. I've been a community organizer for about 20 years. I started as a student organizer at Auburn, and when I was getting my PhD at Berkeley, I was a local organizer there a bit, not as much in Berkeley as I did at Auburn. And then my dissertation research centered around urban agriculture in Birmingham, Alabama. And as a part of my dissertation research, I started Magic City Agriculture Project, which was an anti-racist and community development organization in Birmingham. And we did that for about 8 years. We started a number of different organizations. I think one of the organizations that grew out of that was Dynamite Hill Smithfield Community Land Trust. Another organization that grew out of that is Sweet Alabama. So these are still existing organizations in Birmingham. My wife ended up getting a job at Alabama Rise as the executive director in Montgomery, and I left Birmingham in 2018. I was real burnout. I was burnt to the ground. And I got out of organizing for a couple of years, and I went back into the automotive industry, and which I was an automotive technician before I went to college between the ages of 18 and 23. And got back in the automotive industry, worked at a local dealer. The pandemic hit, and I was like, man, I got all these skills, and I got all this leadership training, and so many people have invested time and money into me to get me that PhD and to teach me the things I needed to know in order to be a good leader. And I mean, you're talking, dozens, if not hundreds of people who have invested at least some time in me.
Right.
And, I felt a responsibility to them with the pandemic hitting to do something to help the community. So I got together with people that I knew, and we decided to start the Automotive Free Clinic. I love the work. I love working on cars. And I love we're a dual power organization, which means that we work on material and cultural levels. And the material levels is obviously working on cars, but we also have something to say about politics and culture in the broader world. And we have a Substack called MACHINISTS, where we talk about the American South, where we talk about economics, we talk about identity politics, we talk about just about anything you can imagine in movement politics. So we engage on two levels, the cultural and the material level, and we're launching a podcast called The Red Viper, which is sort of an evolution of our blog and social media engagements. We're launching that podcast. I think it's going to be this week, but it might be next week.
Oh, that's great. And, one of the things that I like about what y'all are doing with the Free Clinic is that dual power aspect to it. You have skills in politics and you have skills in automotive repair, and you're putting the two together. And I think that's fantastic. And I think that kind of mutual aid efforts where we're utilizing the talents and skills that we already have, but putting them in a more organized direction to sort of sync up with the broader needs of the community. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think we need a lot more of that. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you today and kind of highlight that work you're doing. So you mentioned you have a new podcast coming out sometime this month in October. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the podcast is called The Red Viper, and it's the subtitle is A Black Trans Woman and a Redneck Theorize the Apocalypse.
Now, and, that'll suck you in right there.
Yeah. And, it goes to what you were saying. We sort of see that global institutions are teetering, if not collapsing right now. And the pandemic showed us that they were not able to meet the needs of the people. And we want to highlight how those institutions are failing us with the podcast. But we also want to talk about what we could do as people on the ground to build new institutions that actually do serve the community. And with climate change and the threat of nuclear war, it's a bleak world that we live in, especially if you look at things globally. And I think it's really important for activists, organizers, and just regular people to think about what kind of world we want to live in the future, who controls it, and who provides the services that we need. And I don't think we can trust the government, and I don't think we can trust most businesses to provide those services in a way that actually meets the needs of the people. And that's kind of where the podcast is going. The first podcast, episode 0, we just talk about who we are, but episode 2, which should be out into October, 1st of November, is going to be popular education and art. So we're going to talk about how, basically how we communicate with people and what we think is important, and what we sort of are saying what we thought was important in the first podcast, but the second podcast is about our values and how we communicate with people. So that's a brief synopsis of it. It's in its early stages. The other co-host is Zora Tran, and she's a really, 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 really brilliant person who, despite only being 23 years old, has a wealth of experience in activism and organizing, and has made mistakes like I have, and learned from those mistakes even at her young age. And I really value what she has to say, and I think it's important that people like me, rednecks like me, white working class Southerners, have conversations with Black trans women, because they always try to put us on opposite sides of the fence.
Right.
And we're not on opposite sides of the fence. We want the same type of things. And Zora and I have different styles. Zora has a more heady style than I do. I have a more grounded style, but we're talking about a lot of the same things.
Well, I think that sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to checking out the popular education discussion, because obviously that's some of what we're doing here on the Valley Labor Report, is trying to educate folks and talk to them about issues relevant to working class people, and of course specifically how to organize in workplaces and build a labor movement that can start to address those needs that you're discussing, that governments and businesses simply aren't meeting. And I agree with you. If you look at the future, it doesn't look too promising, the path that we're on right now. And so the more that we can build people power in whatever capacity we can, whether that's through unions in the workplace or through mutual aid networks in the community, I think they all have to work hand in hand.
Agreed.
Yeah. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why we want to, even though we are a labor union show, we want to continually to have these dialogues about mutual aid and about solidarity networks and just other ways that we can shift the balance of power in our communities. And the last project that I wanted to make sure I mentioned before we pivot is the Redneck Studies Fellowship. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because the name alone is definitely intriguing.
Yeah, we got a small grant from Solve, which is a voter engagement program, to do the Redneck Studies Fellowship. And what we're going to explore is the South as an internal colony of the United States and what that means for the people of the South. We have an approach that sort of slices through the traditional stupid arguments about the Civil War. It's the war of Northern aggression, is the war over slavery. It's like, these are tired discussions and they need to be sort of solved to begin with. And, one of our arguments is that it's both. The Civil War was an intra-colonial battle between Northern colonists and the planters in the South, who were essentially colonial administrators for the Northern colonists. And that war was over the planters' competitive advantage of slavery or completely free labor. So instead of us rednecks identifying with the Confederacy, we need to see the Confederacy for what it is and what it was, which is a a nation of wealthy planters who controlled labor and basically everything about the South with an iron fist, and that we should not identify with the Confederacy, but we should identify as workers. And the Civil War was not a battle that the white working class should have ever been fighting because we had no stake in it. It was a war between, like I said, the northern colonists, who were not the great liberators, and the southern planters, who were essentially colonial administrators. Now, there's another interpretation of the Civil War that I think is valid and that I think is parallel, and that's W.E.B. Du Bois's interpretation of the Civil War, that the Civil War was a black proletarian revolution. So these two histories can go side by side and say, hey, people in the South, we can have solidarity around what the Civil War was about, and we don't have to identify with colonial administrators or colonists, Yankee colonists in the North.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to have a broader conversation about the South, and a lot of what you just said resonated with me, and just the very idea of dissecting the word redneck, frankly, resonates. I'm a lifelong Southerner. I know my co-host Jacob is. I believe you are as well.
Yep.
And just, the word redneck brings up a lot of thoughts and experiences for me in terms of my own relationship with, Southern identity, so to speak. Like a lot of Southern white boys, I grew up with my Confederate flag paraphernalia, and certainly at various points would have proudly proclaimed myself a redneck, been called a redneck as a slur as well, the whole gamut of those experiences. And I think there's a lot to dissect when it comes to the South. We are a unique region in this country, and this being a labor movement show, of course, we've talked a lot about the challenges to organizing in the South, some of the unique challenges, and some that are not so unique, but maybe are more pronounced here in some ways. And those run the gamut from hostile laws and governments to entrenched social divisions to chronic underdevelopment. And all of those have played a role in the labor movement, having some struggles to gain success across the South, in the past and the present. And really, the Southern working class more broadly struggles deeply. When we compare the quality of life and the material conditions for working class people in the South to the rest of the country, or even to most of the developed world, we're lagging behind. And I think those are all important things to consider when we talk about, building a movement in the South, and certainly in Alabama. So we've talked a little bit on our show previously, and you mentioned it already today, about some of the ways that the South, places like Alabama, function as internal colonies to be hyper exploited. And something we've also talked about on the show is economic development in the South. What that typically looks like is our politicians groveling, underneath multinational capitalists, attempting to lure them here with generous subsidies, little to no taxes, minimal worker and environmental protections, low wages, low union density. And for this, we as everyday people, working class people, we're supposed to be grateful. We're supposed to be thankful for this job creation. So with all that preamble out of the way, I wanted to turn it over to you to kind of expand on that in terms of the South, and how does the South relate to the rest of the world, and certainly how does it relate to the rest of the country?
Sure. So two things to begin with. I want to say that we use the word redneck. We know that it means white working class Southerner, but we use it aspirationally to indicate all workers of the American and global South, which we combine to call the Deep South. If you look at our economy, the most profitable industry not the biggest, but the most profitable industry in Alabama is timber. Our only billionaire, Jimmy Rain, is a timber baron. And that is a completely extractive and export oriented economy.
Right.
60% of all timberland in Alabama is absentee owned. So we don't own the wealth. The rednecks in Appalachia, black people in the Black Belt, where the timber is, something like 70% of Alabama is timberland. We don't own the wealth. We're in the same condition, whether you're a white person in Appalachia or a black person in the Black Belt, where the timber is. We're in the same situation. We don't own the wealth. Now, that is no different from Mexico or Paraguay or Laos or Uganda or any other global south, what's often called third world country. That is the way their economies are organized. Now, some of these economies are organized around the extraction of labor, which is what the auto industry is doing. It's coming down here looking for cheap labor and extracting labor. Where else are Fords and Nissans and Toyotas and Hondas built? Well, Mexico, the Philippines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same model economy in the American South as it is in the global South. We put these two together. We call it the Deep South. And we say, we want everybody in the Deep South to identify as a redneck or a worker in resistance. Now, there is historical precedent for this. The Battle of Blair Mountain in 1921 was a diverse resistance of miners to the federal government and the Pinkertons. And it was the second instance in American history of aerial bombing of American soil. The first instance was 2 weeks earlier in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the American government bombed Black Wall Street. So you see what they do to black people, they eventually do to Appalachia. So what we really want to see, we want the term redneck to mean, and for us to understand ourselves as a colonized subject, right? So there's the material stuff that I've been talking about that tells us that we're a colonized subject. Well, what about the subjective or cultural parts that tell us we're a colonized subject as well? And you have to look no further than a film that is in the Library of Congress as historically, aesthetically, and culturally significant. And that film is Deliverance, in which it shows a redneck raping a suburban white man in the forest. And rednecks are either defined as sexually deviant and violent or simple. In that film, they're either defined as sexually deviant and violent or simple and basic. This is a common theme in media. If you watch like Ring commercials, the doorbell with the camera on it, you watch like Ring commercials. In the 80s and 90s and some of the 2000s, it was a black person who would have been the thief on the Ring commercial. Right. Now, if you watch the Ring commercial, it's going to be a redneck who's the thief on the Ring commercial. So they're giving us these messages to tell us that we're less than human. And they do that so that they can justify exploiting our resources and taking our wealth and land.
Yeah, I think that's something that is lost a lot in conversations about the South, and you see a lot of times from liberals who will write off the South. It's pretty common to see tropes from liberal corners about we should just let the South succeed again, all that kind of stuff. When hurricanes and natural disasters hit the South, there's some condescension there of these red states and this is what they deserve, or I bet you they'll line up for their socialist FEMA handouts now, and all those things I think confuses the ruling structures of the South with the people of the South.
Exactly. I want to ask you a question. What percentage of Alabamians voted for Donald Trump?
That's a good question. Let's see. It was what, about 60% of those who actually voted, which I guess would have been maybe what, 60% or less turnout overall. So we're talking what, maybe a quarter of the population, if that.
37% and 38% of voting eligible Alabamians did not vote. So more people in Alabama did not vote or voted for Joe Biden than voted for Donald Trump.
Right.
So this red state, blue state crap is propaganda designed to pit us against each other and make sure that we never get on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's something that we try to focus on this show to cut beyond the partisanship, because ultimately we have to be looking at the society around us as working people and as fellow working people, and how we relate to power in our community, how we relate to the economy. And that cuts far beyond the partisanship that is, you know, basically a spectacle in corporate media to be consumed. And you know, not to get too off topic here, but I found it interesting over the years. You've seen like this convergence of, you know, the CNNs and Fox News, the corporate media cycles with sports and entertainment. And they all kind of like look alike now. They all basically talk about some of the same stuff. And it's all just one giant spectacle. And I think that's why it's important to get back to the roots of who has power, who has wealth, where's the wealth come from, where's it going? Because it's easy to get lost in a lot of spectacle unless you are in touch with, you know, those material realities that we're experiencing as folks living here in Alabama and across the South. So
yeah, and I think that you know, the South is the most diverse region in the United States, but we're all Southerners. We all like our green sloppy and our chicken, and it don't matter if you're black, white, or Latino. We all like this stuff, and there are differences in our cultures that are important that we need to celebrate and not fight over. There are differences in our culture that are important that we need to celebrate and not fight over. But there are also a lot of similarities in our cultures because we have working class cultures. And there's similarities in cultures, in working class cultures all over the world. Folk music, for instance. You know, we're talking about the same stuff. You know, the blues and bluegrass came from the same place. You know, and every culture has some sort of folk music, which comes from the struggles of the common people. And, you know, I think we need to recognize our differences and celebrate them, but also recognize where we got things in common and bond around those things.
Absolutely. And that's where, you know, those shared struggles can be so powerful. The relationships forged in struggle can be so powerful. And that's, to me, one of the most promising things about unions and the labor movement is its ability to bring people together across all these divisions, you know, some of which are real and some of which are propped up and artificial. And I think we've seen throughout the history of Alabama a real radical history of people coming together across race, across gender, religion, and other divisions. We've seen people come together to fight back against the elites in control, and we've seen them come together to fight for their common interest, whether that's through labor organizing or through other organizing. I mean, Alabama is the civil rights movement in Alabama changed the world. And so it wasn't just the Bull Connors of the world. You also had a mass movement on the other side fighting for a better world. And I think that's something that it's easy for folks, especially outside the South, to write us all off as bigots and uneducated and reactionaries. And we have our share of those, like everybody else does. They disproportionately hold power down here, but there's a whole beautiful history of Alabama and the South, where ordinary working class people come together and fight for a better future and a better community. And I think that's the story we have to keep highlighting. And I think we're seeing it right now with workers organizing in Birmingham Starbucks, and workers holding the line over 500 days on strike in Brookwood, workers trying to take on the most powerful corporation in the world and Amazon at the Bessemer warehouse. So, those stories are out there, and it's a matter of us, remembering what we do have in common and how we can really help each other, because there's strength in numbers when we come together, and we do have those differences, as you mentioned, but that can make us stronger by bringing in these diverse perspectives and experiences that we all have. We all chip in our piece to the puzzle.
I think the story that needs to be told, that's not told enough, is the story of the populist movement in the 1880s and the 1890s.
Oh, yes.
Which was about labor organizing. It was black and white working class. And it was so powerful that the planters and the industrialists had to steal all of the elections, leading them to create the 1901 Redeemer Constitution, which would break the back of the populist movement using white supremacy and lay the groundwork for Jim and Jane Crow in the 1920s. And, that movement was so powerful that it brought forth a new constitution. And I think we need to tell that story, and it's not told. That's the thing. That story about Alabama and about the South, because the populist movement was South-wide, that story is not told because it's a threat to the powerful. It's a real threat to the powerful to be able to say, hey, look, black and white people got on the same page, and they, for all intents and purposes, won, but it was stolen from them.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was, on my mind as I was trying to think of some of the struggles throughout our history. And I absolutely agree. I think it's clear that, we won the governorship back then, and they cheated. And that's a common theme in Alabama and Southern history, is what they fear the most is when working class people can unite across race and across other differences. And they will cheat and lie and steal whenever and however they can to smash that unity. They fear that unity, but we have enough examples throughout our history where that unity has happened, and the potential that is there. And I think that's something that that continues to inspire me, as hard as it is sometimes in the South to keep going against such odds. There's such potential here, and as we have a huge array of natural wealth here. We have people who are hardworking, people who are diverse, and the moment we ever all can come together along our common interest as working class people, we could reshape this state, and it could be something beautiful.
And you speak of, I want to get back a little bit to what we were talking about before. You speak of the governorship being stolen.
Mm-hmm.
Have any of us ever heard a story of a global South leadership, a global South country's leadership being stolen from the people by, let's say it, colonists?
Right.
So
insert Latin American country here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're talking about is the same situation, and the American South needs to study Simón Bolívar. It needs to study Zapata. It needs to study Subcommandant Marcos. It needs to study the revolutionary leaders of Latin America to learn how we can fight back and overcome our differences in the American South. We in the American South need to learn from the global South about how to fight in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's right on. And I think that's something that I personally will be doing more of. And it's something that I encourage everyone else to as well. And, we don't talk a lot about international issues on this show, or, foreign policy, those sorts of things. But I think this is a really important discussion and a really important thing to keep in the back of your mind as we talk about the South, the ways in which we are related to the global South, the similarities and how our working class is treated, the similarities in how our economies are structured, the similarities in how progressive movements are responded to by those in power when we have them. And so I think that's really important. And something that I found inspiring this summer at the Labor Notes Conference in Chicago was hearing from workers at the GM plant in Mexico who were able to kick out the corrupt union and create their own independent union. Cool. And you know, that's just to kind of tie it all back into labor and into the union movement. That's what I would encourage my brothers and sisters out here to think about. As you know, we have our concerns about jobs being offshored. We have our concerns about globalization and free trade, obviously, and there's unfortunately, you know, a lot of resentment towards immigration as well. But the solution is not to divide us further or to embrace xenophobia and nationalism. The solution is to work together to make all of our lives better. And when those workers in Mexico and Paraguay are organizing, that will ultimately only help us and vice versa. And so that's one of the most inspiring things about the labor movement at its best, is when you see that solidarity and you see workers from all over the country cheering each other on, you know, chipping in a couple bucks here and there, sending pizza to the picket line. That's what it's all about. Remembering what we have in common and how much stronger we are when we come together. So to get off my soapbox there for a second, Zach, was there anything else you really wanted to get out there as we kind of tie up this conversation about the South and where we sit in relation to the global South and the rest of the world?
No, I covered everything that I wanted to cover, and I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate what Valley Labor Report does for our community, and I'm really happy to see the success y'all are having. It's a real positive thing. We need our own media. We really need our own media, and it's y'all are honest, y'all are straightforward. And y'all talk to the people. Y'all don't talk at the people. And I appreciate y'all. And, you know, power to the people.
Well, hell yeah, Zach. I really appreciate that. Appreciate your kind words and your support. I want to give you a final chance to, you know, plug your websites and everywhere else people need to go to find your work and support your work. But yeah, thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the kind words. We absolutely do need our own working class independent media, free from corporate overlords and right-wing cranks, which so dominate our media landscape. And we need our own bases of power, our own bases of support, our own wealth. And that's what you're working on. That's what we're working on. So Zach, give us where can folks find your work and support your work?
So you can find what we're doing on automotivefreeclinic.org. You can go to automotivefreeclinic.org /fellowship to apply for the Redneck Studies Fellowship, which includes a $100 stipend. You can find me on Twitter at Redneck Activist, and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook at Zach Silverman Hayden, and you can find me on Instagram at The Mad Redneck. So I'm all over social media. Come holler at me. Come tell me you think I'm crazy. You know, I'll talk to you. I'll talk. If you're not a ridiculous ideologue of the left or the right, and you can have a decent, meaningful conversation with somebody without getting all pissy about it, I'll have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Zach. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your work.
All right, man. Take care.